Hello, everyone. It looks like it's going to be a very rainy day here. So if you hear some thunder coming through, I apologize, but hopefully the new sound system is getting rid of a lot of that extra noise in the background. Hi, Turtle Muse, Autistic Shill, so good to see you here. T King, nice to see you. Yeah, always grateful. Dan, Grace Case, really happy to see all of you here. Um, we're going to go over the last 2 days of actually no testimony in the Masterson trial. There were no witnesses brought to the stand on Monday. There was just consultation between both prosecution and the defense with the judge back and forth on how they were going to proceed and did their jury instructions. Um, they're going to be, they mapped it out on what they would want the jury to know about, and they went over all of that. They had motions, and at the end of court that day, she decided that, well, closing arguments were going to be yesterday. And they had closing arguments, and you may have been reading quite a bit about it. Well, it was, from what I've read of Tony Ortega's reporting on it, and from what I am reading in many articles that are coming out, that there are now, because it's the end of the trial, there are more reporters in the courtroom taking notes and doing the quotes. It was a bit contentious. It seems to be that this trial is going to come down, as most trials of assault are, or forcible assault, uh, consent. Mm, yeah, the defense went there. Um, but so did the prosecution. So did DA Mueller. Um, just let me give you a couple of quotes from DA Mueller. Most articles are going with the lead that the prosecutor actually labeled Danny Masterson a rapist during his closing argument. Okay. He came right out to the jury and said Danny Masterson was a man for whom no never meant no. He then went into every allegation the women were making in regards to assaults. So he detailed all 7 of the encounters that the 4 women have talked about in detail back to the jury again. Um, not, every single part of it, but enough so that you got the brunt of it. He reminded the jury that while Masterson looked well dressed, well groomed gentleman, he can assure him that those victims have a different image of Mr. Masterson. He referenced a TV screen slide listing each victim for Masterson's and the 3 counts of what he is being charged for, which is forcible rape during the years of 2001 and 2003. Currently, Masterson, well, now 46 years old, married with children, a former actor star on the 70s show. Some of you all remember him from there, you know. That went until what, 2006? So he was actually still on that show when these instances occurred. He claims that Masterson was someone who was the center of the circular world, kind of the center of this tight group of friends. He was throwing parties, having people over. He was the guy that always invited you back, and if you drank too much, he offered you a place to stay. All right. However, if you were a young woman, Mueller states, as each of these 3 victims were at the time, you were far from safe because if you were incapacitated in his bed, he would assault you. If you were incapacitated elsewhere in the house, he would come and find you. And if you were at his home and you were not yet intoxicated, he would offer you the alcohol to get you there and then forcibly assault you. If you were in a relationship with him, he would control you. He would believe that he's entitled to have sex with you at any time he feels like it. And if you say no, he doesn't care. Now, of course, Masterson's lawyer, Phillip Cohen, went on afterwards. In between, Mueller gets to go first, the prosecution, because they have to prove beyond doubt. The burden of proof is on the prosecution. Then comes the defense. And Mueller told the jurors that he was horrified that the prosecution is ignoring all the conflicting testimony and fabricated, he used the word fabricated evidence before detailing the high burden of proof required to convict Masterson. And he used terminology his use of language from what they're reporting really resonated with me because he used it terms like collaboration, fabrication, um, extremely high burden of proof, as if it couldn't be reached. He said 4 weeks of trial cannot actually prove this. He blamed the prosecutors for unfairly bringing up Masterson's involvement in Scientology, although it was Masterson's own previous attorneys that actually entered that in. However, mm, he said Cohen actually sat down and did the word search on the whole trial of 4 weeks on Scientology, and he said that the word was mentioned 700 times. He mentioned that in the jury instructions that the trial is not about Scientology, and we get that. I wonder, though, you know, mm, I wonder, did did the defense actually search the word rape also? I believe that would have came up a lot more than 700 times in this trial. But mm, he wants to make it about that, right? You all know that I think the only one making this trial about Scientology is Phillip Cohen. I believe the 700 times that it was mentioned, I believe at least 350 of them were him complaining, asking for a mistrial, mentioning Scientology over and over again. How many sidebars? How many first thing in the mornings have you guys heard me say that it was reported that Philip Cohen walked in complaining about something about somebody on Twitter about Scientology and the jury might have heard it and blah, 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 blah. Mm. I think he's going to have to own a good portion of those words that were counted as Scientology. Just saying, just saying. But this was Danny Masterson walking into court. This was not today, though, although it is reported that he did show up today, and he was there outside of the courtroom in the hallway with his wife, Bijou, and that upon entering the courtroom, Tony Ortega, in his reporting, said that Judge Almeida was there and she had brought extra Halloween candy that's still left over from the holiday to share with everyone and said that everyone was welcome to stay while they waited because, they have to be there open if the jury has any questions at all. But we'll get back to that towards the end. Let's just keep talking about the rest of the closing arguments because there was a lot. There was definitely a lot. All right. So Cohen is still blaming the prosecution for the Scientology issue. Okay. He mentioned jury instructions involving words like bias, sympathy, prejudice, or public opinion. He wants to say that Danny's not guilty because Scientology is an issue. That's not the issue, is it? That's not the issue. The issue is the legal definition of rape, which is penetration without consent. And there's quite a problem with that one because many of the statements in regards to the incidents say that they were unconscious or uncontrolled in their body and unable to actually correlate. So you can't give consent when you're unconscious or sleeping, as in some of the incidences was reported. You also, it's not consent when you're yelling no, when you're fighting back, when you're pushing them off, when you're saying you don't want to. Excuse me. That is not consent. Okay. And here in the real world, most of us agree that consent can be withdrawn at any time. That just because one of the Jane Does consented to have vaginal sex, she never consented to be thrown over on a bed and violated anally while saying no, while saying she didn't want it. And that was the incident where they said that it was so vile and so forceful that she vomited in her own mouth while it happened. And she was saying no the whole time. A court of law agrees that consent can be withdrawn, that it's fluid, that consenting to one act does not mean everything, that being in someone's bed naked does not mean you're consenting to everything. This has been proven in case law over and over again, and yet repeatedly defense attorneys in these trials will challenge it and say, well, you were there, you went back, you talked to him a couple of days later. This is what defense attorney Cohen kept bringing up, totally disregarding Mindy Mechanic's testimony that was normal, especially based within the culture that they were all in a unified church with all the same beliefs, and that it is even without that unified belief normal for someone to try to rationalize it, that it didn't happen. It couldn't be what it was because what it was too much to deal with. The expert witness, Mindy Mechanic, she spoke a lot in regards to that, and she made it okay for other victims out there that are going through the same thing to get rid of some of the shame when you are violated against your will and kind of taking the teeth out of defense attorney Cohen's argument that, well, if you feel shame, then you must have done something wrong, right? Hmm. Or Scientology's blame on the women when they said, well, you brought it in. You can't report it because you did something to cause this. It's all on you. Mm. Too often, this is very much what our own society pushes on us, not intentionally, mostly by microaggression, if you know what I mean. Those little small passive aggressive bullshits, you know, in all of these stories. We all know someone who has a story of a close call, something that happened they didn't want. And then they go and tell someone, even a close family member, a friend, a therapist, an official. And some of the first questions they ask are, where were you? What did you consent to? How did you get in that situation? It's even worse if it's someone you know. As the expert witness Mindy Mechanic testified to, when it is someone you know, it is twice unsurmountable to try to think that it even happened. How did you get there? Call it anything but what it is. It couldn't possibly be rape. Rape, that would make it horrible. That would make it something I have to deal with and them and all my friends and everyone who knows them. She made it and testified to that often assault victims will categorize it as something else, as these women did, because they knew they couldn't come forward and say what it was, because the organization that they belonged to told them, no, it can't be rape. Danny Masterson is allowed to have sex with you if you're in a relationship whenever he wants. It's your duty. And the Jane Doe who testified that she was actually trying to see if it was going to be a relationship, she felt the same because she had prior reported an assault by her own previous boyfriend to Scientology and was told it wasn't rape. That if you're in a relationship or you consent to even romantic whatever, that's a given. It saddens me to think that this is what they're telling women these days, right now in 2022. That's what is being told to anyone who tries to report anything in Scientology in regards to sexual assault. Now, I may surprise you a little bit now because I'm actually going to say that Danny Masterson is a victim of Scientology also. Yep, lifelong member, whole family's in there. The entitlement he feels to do whatever he wants comes from their teachings, comes from being an upstat, being treated special. He doesn't have to follow the rules. There are no rules for him. I'm not saying he's right. I'm not saying he's not guilty as hell. I'm hoping the women will get the verdict that I feel, whether biased or not, that they deserve. Because the involvement of Scientology made it that this culture, this ability, this access, this I didn't do anything wrong attitude that Masterson seems to be wearing during the whole trial. We saw the court drawings of how he sat there, calm, cool, and collected. And I'm sure most defendants would be advised by their attorneys and consultants that that's how they should appear, as if they were innocent. But we did also see glowing hatred coming out of his eyes when certain witnesses were called up, or when he heard that certain people were in the hallway, all of them related to being ex Scientologists. It appears that his past has come back to haunt him. For whatever reason, he may have stopped doing what he did. It seemed to be a pattern from what they are reporting of a way of life that he had for quite a bit of time. Because remember, Jane Doe Fall came forward and said it started back in 1996. It was Coleman. Mhm. It started before his relationship with Jane Doe 3. And while he was in his relationship with Jane Doe 3, she claims that it was repeatedly a non, she didn't get to consent. It was a given. It would happen every single time. Now, defense attorney Cohen made a big deal out of that, saying, like, well, you were there for 6 years. And even after you broke up, you went back. He didn't listen to the words that she said about trying to get him to do better, about loving the man, and about the teachings telling her it was her duty, and that she just wanted him to do better, and she wanted him to go to Scientology. She wanted him to go through the auditing to try to deal with what he was doing. She reported also, Jane Doe 3 did, other instances of him mistreating in public other women degradingly in front of their own husbands, once to the point where he was beaten on the street severely. He felt entitled to his opinion about other people, how they looked, women in particular. She wanted him to do better. But defense attorney Cohen is trying to turn that into, well, there really wasn't anything there. It couldn't have happened. He's basically saying it couldn't have happened. This distresses me when they take that route. Mm. It did happen. There are 4 separate women reporting different instances. The only thing in common is that they were altered as far as having control of their bodies. They were either unconscious asleep, unconscious drugged, unconscious drunk, not in full capacity. They all say they didn't consent, and they all say he did it anyway. That's what they have in common. But the actual incidences are not that similar. They all report different things he said, different things he did, different mannerisms, different. It's not a contrite collaboration as defense Attorney Cohen is trying to represent in his closing article. That there's so many inconsistencies in their stories, they can't be telling the truth. Those inconsistencies mean they are telling the truth. As Mindy Mechanic, the expert, by the way, the only expert who testified. Because let's be clear, when it came to the defense's side to present their arguments and their witnesses, they declined. They had 3 experts listed to come forward and brought none. They had Danny Masterson's assistant on the list, Bree, and didn't bring her forward. What does that say to you? Are they so confident? Danny Masterson's defense team brought no one to the stand. No one. Hmm. Hmm. Yes. Yes, always grateful. I noticed this also. She says, always says, Cohen also seemed fixated on trying to bring out inconsistencies by the prosecution. Yes, because when he told the different stories of each girl, of each woman, rather, who was violated, who is accusing Danny Masterson of violating them without consent, they basically, he treated each one individually and addressed each story a little bit different. But there were no real big inconsistencies by the prosecution. They went to the reports and he pulled the reports and showed them. Okay. They went to the pictures and they brought witnesses who actually saw Jane Doe 2 in person at the time to clarify what was actually being seen in the photos. Okay. There's I don't know what he really meant much by inconsistencies, to tell you the truth. But it did seem that the defense, and to their credit, they must, just pulled everything out that they could. He often threw fits, defense attorney Cohen, about the smallest thing. If you said the word Scientology, I think he just knew he had a big mountain to overcome, and he just did whatever he could. Yes, I do believe that there may have been like small cute puppy says, "Oh yeah, they definitely brainwash people like that to stay in abusive situations." Not so much a brainwash, but like in Jane Doe 3's defense, I mean, that's who we were speaking about when he was saying, "Oh, well, you stayed. It was a 6-year long relationship. If it happened all that time, like why were you there?" And then why? It actually focused on the fact that she still stayed in contact with him after they broke up and that they did have an encounter in New York that was quite pleasant, or she thought so at the time, until he took a camera out and took pictures of her being nude, and she just freaked out and said, "Oh my god, he's never going to change." She asked him to delete it and he said, "No, I don't think I will." And then she knew he wasn't going to change. She had hoped so. She had hoped he'd grow. She loved him. She said so repeatedly on the stand. At that time she had great love for him, but she wasn't in love for him. Hmm. No, you sound fine, Sean. You do, you know. Why did no one at these parties intervene? Well, you see, Danny waits and pulls them aside to the private room. The assaults happened in his shower, privately at the end of the night, or in his bedrooms. Okay. And when it comes to Jane Doe 4, the second assault that she reported, which he's not been charged with, not any of her assaults. One happened at his home. The second time he came to her home with a flask, and it happened in her house, and he dragged her to her bedroom. Mm. Some of the incidences happened in a shower, his shower, or started in the jacuzzi. at his home, mostly after the parties are died down and there's nobody there and people are sleeping. Small cute puppy says the church's stance is that he did nothing wrong, of course, so he doesn't need to defend himself. Exactly. Um, they brought no one. No one. And yes, yes, always. I agree with you. That is so true about Danny. I assume you're speaking about what I said about Danny Masterson because it's so true. That is all he has heard for many years. He was made to feel that he is untouchable. And I get that. And it makes him a victim too. A victim of not living in reality, living in the bubble of Scientology, but now he's got real life reality outside of Scientology that he has to deal with. And I'm hoping he does. I'm not saying he has to leave Scientology, but he should take accountability for his behaviors, for the harm he's caused others. Mm. I'm a little torn based on the statute of limitations. I know some of you may be. Each one of these chargeable forced rape cases, accusations rather, come with 15 years to life. If he's convicted of all three, it's 45 years to life. If he's convicted of any of them. The only way they could bring all three forward and escape the statute of limitations is because of the life sentence. Remember, we talked about that before. He had the prosecution, DA Mueller, had to bring all three of them forward at the same time in one case in order for the statute of limitations not to be an issue. Cohen seemed to think that if he could push the inconsistencies enough, then he did not need to call any witnesses. Seems very odd, though. I do. I do agree with that. Mhm. And, you know, I kind of I think it's odd, but it's also a strong stance on their side. They want to show that they don't have anything to worry about. It may resonate with the jury in that manner. Um, and hello, Mr. Hubbard. Really, you know, I understand humor. I could be pretty funny myself, but I'm not feeling it today. So, mm, in regards to something as important as this, when it comes to consent and statute of limitations, and we're talking about something legal and a few people's real lives, I'm going to ask you not to be an ass. All right? Mm. Hey, Robski, it's good to see you. Hmm. He's Small cute puppy says his top priority is making sure the church doesn't look bad in these. And that would be Cohen or Danny, yes, but I'm sure the church does have some issues right now because it does keep coming up and they cannot avoid it in regards to this case. They have a whole civil case that will be following after this. There are several civil cases that are going on with Scientology right now, and I am going to be reporting on them. We're not done with this in regards to what has happened here with Scientology. The way that they interfered in these women actually being able to press charges was wrong. Okay. We did see during this trial that Lisa Marie Presley did give testimony based she did give it not testimony in the case in the trial on the stand, but she gave a deposition, she gave an interview rather to DA Mueller, and everybody saw it, and it does indicate that she was told by Scientology to go talk to one of the Jane Does and convince her not to go to the police. And that she got immunity so she could say so she couldn't be prosecuted for the hindering of someone reporting a crime. That's prosecutable. She could go to jail too. She could have charges against her. But she felt strongly enough about it that she's speaking about it. Okay. And she got immunity to do it. And I hope that that will be able to go over to the civil trial where it will mean more because the civil trial is about Scientology and Danny Masterson harassing them and preventing them from moving forward and pressing charges. And was the delay. Thank you for taking care of the bots, my mods. You guys are great. And because it's in regards to this case, we're probably going to get more and more. So thank you. Thank you very much. There's so much more on this. So let's move a little bit more. Okay. Hmm. Let's just say that Cohen blamed the prosecutors unfairly for bringing up Masterson's involvement in the Church of Scientology. And like I said, he told those jurors that 700 times in his trial Scientology was mentioned. Okay. However, there's a reason for those words and those rules, just like there's a reason for the government standpoint why Scientology has been mentioned 700 times, Cohen said. But Superior Judge Charlene F. Almedo intervened and she reminded the jury that the 700 figure is not evidence. Yes, she did. She reminded the jury, to her great credit, that the evidence is what was the testimony only, and not the closing arguments, not what Mueller says, and not what Cohen says. That's not evidence. When it goes to the jury, they have only the testimonies and what was brought forth during the trial to go by. They have to remember the opening and closing arguments because it's not evidence. It does not, they can't, even if they ask for it, it doesn't get submitted. Hmm. Because interestingly enough, there was a jury question today. hmm A jury question came through, and it's pertinent to what I just said. So let me just pull up a little bit of code. Now, this is coming from reporting on one article that hit the paper, not the I mean online, not the paper. Okay. Well, here we go. Judge Almedo said that the jury's question is that they are requesting the degree of guilty chart from the defense and copies of the police reports. Because you see, uh, the defense presented a chart of how guilty are you for this and this and this, okay, and had copies of the police reports there too. But Judge Almedo said that nope, mm-mm. She read out what response she plans to give to the jury. The attorney's closing arguments are not evidence, and any demonstrative charts not previously entered are not evidence. Requested charts and police reports will not be provided. The response is longer, according to Tony Ortega and a couple of other sources, but that's the general point of it. No, you can't have it because just because Cohen said it doesn't make it evidence. It's not. Nice try, Cohen, though. Hmm. Cohen registered an objection. Of course he did, saying that part of the response is redundant, but Mueller did like that version of it, and so Judge Almedo stuck with it and sent it off to the jury. Okay. Naturally, everybody is going to be concerned, and I am too, that the first question they have is about something that Cohen said in his closing arguments, that something that he said resonated with them, and they wanted to back it up, or they wanted to see what he meant by it, something like that. Mm. But nonetheless, it was denied because it's not evidence. So hopefully they will turn back to the testimony instead. Okay. There was, it's been quiet all morning as far as he said, but around a little bit before 12, the deputy came back in and said that the jury wanted to break for lunch. And I have not actually heard anything after that. They were supposed to come back a little after 1, and so far, I don't have anything else coming in from Tony Ortega or anyone right now. And I don't expect them to. until tomorrow. Um, I think that in order to weigh it all out, the amount of testimony on the 4 weeks, all being most of it uh first person for Jane Doe's, okay, talking about all those instances, and then all of the detective reporting, and then the expert witness. It's a lot to go over. Hey Mippet, I'm glad to see you. I'm so glad that you are doing better, and oh yeah, I'm having a good time. But thank you for stopping by. Yes. And welcome, Stella. Thank you for coming in also, I see. And Robski, of course. I'm so happy that you stopped by yourself. It's always good to see you, dude. Um, mm. But anyway, closing arguments. I will then remind you that, with the closing arguments that happened, Masterson did was able to be there and he's listening to it. Okay. He did. Okay. Mm. After Cohen did this whole big thing and tried to point out all the inconsistencies in the testimony, this one didn't say this about that and then changed it to that, and he really laid out a plan that he thought they all worked together just to ruin Danny Masterson, some kind of vengeance thing. Then he put the timeline on how guilty, because he really wants to say, like, you know, when is he guilty? Was he guilty when she had vaginal sex? That's not what they're saying. They're saying when they said no, it became an act. And I was struck by something that Judge Almeida said on Monday when they were going back and forth about what they would instruct the jury on. And they were Cohen was trying to say, well, what counts are we actually going for here? Because they mentioned so many incidences, and we should only stick to the ones that they are actually going to call forcible rape. And Judge Almeida said, charged or not, I need to remind you that each time he penetrated that woman against her will, who is accusing him, it's rape. So we could go with like 125 of them here right now. And I had to applaud her because she did push him back. She goes, you want to play petty with me, dude? I'm going to play petty with you with the words too. I think she was getting a little annoyed. I don't blame her. I mean, that's all speculative from what they're reporting, because remember, I don't have the transcript. I'm only going by what Tony Ortega and several others, like got Deadbeat, Law and Crime, Variety, NBC News, uh, a couple of others up there. And they all said the same thing, that she said something pretty generally along the same lines. But I am paraphrasing. They're not quotes. Okay. But it's true. Okay, because what is the definition of rape? Penetration without consent. She slammed it back at the defense, and let him go. hmm Anyway, DA Mueller has been arguing passionately for these jurors to convict Masterson of each of the three counts that are being charged, although more than three counts. Up to 7 explicit incidences were laid out for the jury. 3 of them are being charged. 3 of them, they have to weigh in on whether Masterson is guilty or not. He took those jurors through a slideshow that included graphic testimony quotes from Masterson's victims and reminders of the prominent role Masterson's status as a Scientologist played in the 4-week trial. While Judge O'Malley limited testimony about the church, which some former members call a cult, jurors still heard testimony about the huge role it played when women first started accusing Masterson. Because with even October 1st's opinion from Judge Almeida, her ruling stated that Scientology was not on trial. Okay, being a Scientologist was not going to be on trial. However, how the women felt and how they were guided and what led them not to actually pursue charges and why they felt the way they felt was pertinent, because number one, they did not report it outside of the church. They did not even understand that it was rape in some instances until years later after therapy and stuff like that. Okay. Um it's all pertinent as to their state of mind, the condition they were in, what they were dealing with at the time. And so she allowed it. And that is what Mueller's referring to. Okay. Mueller reminded them that Jane Doe 3 said she joined that Church of Scientology at Masterson's behest, that she was a model prior and she secured a Revlon contract. She worked with Cindy Crawford, okay, and that she moved into his mansion within a few weeks. She was young, remember? She had just turned 18 when she met Masterson. And she felt that being in this guy's world, mhm, she was in his world completely. Only his friends, only his circle. She gave up everything to be a Scientologist. She gave up her family contact, but she did so by her own choice because she believed that that church was going to save her life. And she kept saying that, okay, that that's what she thought at the time. And that's why she wanted Danny Masterson to go to the church and report what he did also so that he could be counseled. You know, Jane Doe 3, which I won't say her name, some of them do. So she has given permission to many to use it because she did out herself after Danny Masterson outed her in 2017 when the charges and the investigation was coming forward. Um, but I'm going to keep calling her Jane Doe 3 just to keep consistent with the rest of the trial and the other Jane Doe's requests. But she's spoken publicly about Masterson and Scientology um, a lot. And when she actually wrote to the U.S. House of Representatives Committee, she considered herself a rape and cult survivor. She testified in trial about two attacks by Masterson in September and December of 2001. But Masterson is only charged for the second in December. She is also married to a rock star, a band, the Mars Volta lead singer. So we all know who she is. And he also testified. He was the one who, when she told the story of what happened with Masterson, just blurted out, "That is rape." And she didn't believe it. She then contacted a rape hotline and told them the scenario, and they confirmed that yes, that is sex without consent. That is penetration without consent, and that is the legal definition of rape. He also went out and displayed the report that one of the Jane Does gave to Scientology and what was happening. And they actually had told her not to use the word. Despite being told that you can't go to the police, mm, she did that anyway, right after. Mm. She then heard from an attorney from the Church of Scientology, and who went to her house and delivered a message from a member of the church that she reported to by the name of Schwartz. And you are in so much trouble because they named him as a witness in the police report. He also reminded the jurors that she then was asked to sign in a non-disclosure agreement that she wouldn't talk about it anymore. She was told that she would have to be a suppressive person. If she did not, she would be kicked out. Her daughter at that point, she has a daughter, was in a Scientology school. Her whole family was in there. She felt pressured. And yes, she signed it. And Masterson paid $400,000 to her. That came up in the trial. But does that actually go against that it happened or not? What I actually think is that's evidence that it did happen. Why would Danny Masterson pay $400,000 to keep somebody quiet if there was nothing to it? Not like he's worried about his reputation. Danny Masterson also always had a bad boy reputation. Least let's not forget the DJ Donkey Punch. Is Danny Masterson really worried about his reputation that he'd pay $400,000 for it? I don't think so. He was worried about criminal charges. He was worried about a rape trial. At least that's how it looks to me. Remember, I'm allowed to speculate. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a paralegal. I'm someone here reporting on this trial exactly how I see it because I like the law. I love the law. And I'm particularly fond of the law when it comes to issues of consent and where the lines are, and also statute of limitations. In this particular case had both. It wasn't because I don't like Danny Masterson. It wasn't because I like to say the word rape, because I don't. I don't think you guys like to hear it either, but it's necessary. Because if we don't call it what it is, they win. It should be uncomfortable. Y'all should get uncomfortable hearing me talk about it. I'm damn freaking uncomfortable being up here speaking about this trial, speaking about what they went through, how they were treated in the court by the defense, what it takes to come forward, for anyone to come forward when being sexually assaulted. It should be uncomfortable because our society has made it that way and we have to fight against it. And we have to keep saying it to get over it. We have to keep saying it's wrong. We have to keep fighting against it. We have to keep prosecuting those who do it. When entitlement exists, we need to push back. People need to be held accountable for. They do deserve a fair trial. And in reality, I think Danny Masterson got it. There's so much blurring of the lines because of the Scientology issue. He may get it in his, he thinks he's not getting a fair trial. I actually think he's getting more than a fair trial because he's not being judged just on his merits in what he did. They also have to look on whether or not people are persecuting him for other things or coming at him for other things. They're giving him loopholes and things to jump through. His defense attorney used them all and quite well. He's getting more than a fair trial, regardless of what defense attorney Cohen would like you to believe. It goes both ways. So now we wait for the jury to come back. After defense attorney Cohen was done, defense attorney Mueller gets a second shot at the jury, so to speak. And he did hammer it home and again reminded the jury what the definition, the legal definition of rape was. How is it possible to say and consent when you're sleeping? And when you wake up from sleeping and someone pushes a pillow over your face, how do you consent? Hmm. When someone is choking you when you're fighting back, how is that consent? Because I kid you not, defense attorney Cohen said to the jury, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it was repeated in every article that I read. He literally said to them, if Danny Masterson believes there was consent and acted accordingly, you cannot find him guilty. I hope that that one statement pisses you all off as much as it did I. Does that not smell of entitlement? So, in other words, if Danny thinks it's okay because you're here in my bed and you're naked, I can do whatever I want to you. It's okay. He reasonably thought he had consent because he dragged you upstairs and you didn't like punch his lights out? Cause what? Cause what? I wasn't strong enough to push you off? Cause I was unconscious or sleeping? Come on. Really? Really? So we wait. We're gonna wait. Hello, godless granny. Mm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, I want to put this up. Yes. It showed how much a woman risks by telling, and that other women look down on them for making waves. Exactly. That is that movie, The Last Duel. In I do recommend you all watch it. It does show that even when you think you're getting support, are you? Hmm. Hmm. I do. I do think he's being given more than a fair trial, and they're trying to say not. And you know what? I do see an appeal coming down the road. I don't know, Granny, if you'll still hear how you feel about that. But based on how many times Cohen asked for a mistrial and was denied, I mean, my gosh, there's a lot to look at there. Mm. Yep. Mm. Yeah, tax exemption and all. That's a whole nother thing, small cute puppy. I mean, I could go on with a whole nother series on that. I know, godless, it's hard to say without being there, Granny. I get it. But just to let you know, he's had 7 attempts at verbally asking for a mistrial. He even on Monday asked for a motion to dismiss based on the fact he just walked up, which is happens often with defenses, and just told the judge that the prosecutor did not meet their burden of proof and he wants the whole thing thrown out. And she just said, "Okay, no, denied." And that was the end of that. They didn't even go into details. And that kind of happens a lot. Like he's got to give it his last shot. Yeah, but I get it. Um I agree with you, Granny, in speculating in regards to religion and whether or not Scientology is a religion or a cult, or whether all religions are cults and all of that. Like, I do believe that people are allowed to believe whatever they want, and I hold my tongue against others' beliefs. I do. But do I feel that they did actually contribute to this in a way, especially in Danny Masterson's entitlement and his attitude, in the way that the women were treated when they went? Absolutely. Like the mindset that was put on these women was that they did something wrong. And I'm going to push back on that, whether it's their doctrine or not. Um, that's right, Godless Leg. That's what I'm finding, Godless Granny. I'm glad you're conferring with me, because every defense lawyer makes that motion at the end. You got nothing to lose. You're like, hey, last shot, let's try. What's going on? Mm. Well, here we are. Now we are still waiting for um the jury. I do believe that they will be back tomorrow, hopefully. That is my thinking based on some of the questions that the question that they asked. But mm, the other thing is, as long as it goes like this, Judge Almeida has done, and I have praised her almost every episode that I've done on this trial. And I'm going to do it again because she wanted to be done by Thanksgiving week and she kept this on track. Boom, all the way through. She didn't take any bulls. She tried to be as fair as she could on both sides, and she was. She really was. You know, especially on the Scientology issue, she did what she could, you know. So I'm glad she pushed back during arguments on Almeida about his 700 words was it mentioned, and this isn't about Scientology. Is I'm telling you, most of those words were uttered by Cohen in his mistrial requests every other day. For one, they were all about. And Karen Goldstein, his second chair, coming in and saying, remember, she came in and she was like, well, there's been so much press. There's billboards up, and there's this, and this one made a statement about that. And it was all outside of the courtroom. The jury's already been admonished not to pay attention to social media or anything. So she just came in and testified in a room full of people to the judge that this was all going on. She made it evident to everybody. Thankfully, the jury's not there because this all goes on before the jury is there. But yeah, like you don't want it to be about Scientology. Why do you keep bringing up Scientology? Really? I'm curious to find out, like, if we ever do get transcripts, if anybody ever gets a copy of that transcript, hey, I will pay you. I want that transcript because I want to run that search. I want to find out how many times the defense said that word versus versus Mueller, because I do believe it's at least 50-50, and they gotta take responsibility for some of that. Mhm. Yeah, I agree with you here. I do small, cute puppy. My point is simply that from a purely legal standpoint, Scientology is a church. The fact it's actually an incredibly destructive cult is separate. Yes, They can be both at the same time. Yes, they can. Mhm. And Estella says it's perfectly right to criticize actual harmful ideologies like this. Hating religion in general is silly. This is something else. And I totally agree with you, Estella. I totally agree. Because it is a violent crime, would he be taken into custody right away? I do not believe so because he's out on $3.5 million bail. And I think sentencing has to occur. But I would have to check into that more deeply because I'm just going by just something I know from another trial when it was sexual assault. Yes, it's a violent crime. It's a criminal offense. He's 15 to life for each event, 45 to life if he gets guilty on all three. Mm. It is a tense wait, Juju. I'm waiting and I'm waiting, and I will be ready with another one tomorrow or the next day or the next day, some short time. I don't know if I'll do it by video or a live. Um, that's a good question. I think why don't I put a poll up for you before I leave? Or a okay, I'm going to just ask you live or video. Do you prefer the verdict as a video or a live? Because I mean, if we're just gonna I personally was thinking that you may want to discuss it like you do now, like we talk about everything that's been going on. And I'm perfectly okay to do that whenever this verdict comes in and just schedule up a live. We're all going to hear about it on the news and all. We're going to know what the verdict was. But to actually pull everything together, just like I do now after the fact, and run a live for you that you can come and discuss it with me if you choose. But if you prefer the other, that's cool too. Mhm. I suspect there will be an appeal also, the Turtle Muse, but as to the grounds, I don't know. But I would say in anything this serious, it's always that if there's anything that they can appeal on, they will, because it's just it's 45 years to life if he gets guilty on all three. And yes, Mrs. Cassandra, the jurors are deliberating right now. First full day of deliberation. They were handed the case yesterday at close. They got their instructions from Judge Almeida, and they were given the case yesterday after closing arguments were finished. Small cute puppy. I'm honestly concerned about how much pressure the church could be putting on the jurors and their families. I have seen that repeatedly on social media lately. Um, and I am hoping that it's not true that they have been sequestered enough they haven't been contacted. But mm, you know, I don't know. Mrs. Cassandra says 5 votes, 100% live. It's a done deal. There's more than 5 people here. There's at least 16, 17 of you. So, currently, just vote. Hmm. Yes, and we do know this small Q copy. They are not above intimidation, extortion, and blackmail tactics, has been well documented by so many people. Tony Ortega and Chris Shelton, for one. Before I did this live, I actually attended Chris Shelton's live for a while, and he was doing questions that people had given him before in regards to how Scientology operates. Being an ex-Scientology Scientologist for so many, he was a Scientologist for so many years, and he's also a psychologist. He also well versed in psychology, in critical thinking. A great person to ask questions of because he's so forthcoming and honest, and tries to look at it all sides. He's not demeaning in anything or doesn't use language to try to beat up on anybody about anything. I really enjoyed speaking with him on my channel the other day. I hope to do more with him. But if you get to catch him live and ask some questions, or if you're interested in more about the cult of Scientology, or whether you think it's a cult or not, check out his channel. It's listed below. He does a podcast. He does lives for Q&A, and it was quite interesting today. The trial did come up. Of course, I asked a question about the trial, and he was talking about some previous questions and then the trial in general, and he gave a nice synopsis of it in his view, and the interference of Scientology. Um, Tony Ortega also, if you haven't subscribed to the Underground Bunker, he has done exceptional work. Most of the reporting out here from everyone is coming from Tony being in that courtroom, and I applaud his dedication, his willingness to share. He is sharing it with all of us, okay, and so that we can speak on it because we couldn't get into the courtroom, and we were speaking on it before, but there were no cameras allowed, so we couldn't know, okay, and I'm grateful to Tony, and I think that you all should subscribe. And he deserves all the shout out for all the information that's out there. He's trying to be unbiased. He's saying what happens in the courtroom. He does give his opinion. And the way he's been reporting on Scientology, we'd have to say that he's a little biased in that way, but he does have a unique perspective on it because he's got long-term history on what things mean, who people are, and things going forward, you know. So he's entitled to it, whatever bias. But he actually, as a reporter, did a really good job of keeping a lot of that out of there, you know. And he did have a little nice quote about, defense attorney Cohen every day about his dressing. He did dress quite a dapper man for all the things that came out of his mouth, I have to say. He was quite the dresser. Mm, Anyway. Mm. Anyway. Mm. It is in the Masterson. It's in my library chat. Small cute copy, puppy. We did it about a week or so ago, and it was about Scientology. And it's there. It'll be in the library chats version, and but not in the Masterson trial because we did touch on the Masterson trial, but we touched more on his channel and what he does with Scientologists who are leaving and the good work that he's doing and how he's trying to make a difference out there. Okay. Right, Jujubee. Tony Ortega is biased, but he isn't claiming it's a slam dunk. He's preparing his audience for any way this goes, and I appreciate that. And I do too. And thank you for noticing it. He's been very good. Yep. It's really good. But on that, I think that's it. Unless you guys have any questions, I'm going to sign off and I'll be back when we've got a verdict or on Friday just to say more about what's being reported. Well, hopefully, the jury doesn't take too long and we're back tomorrow. That would be quite interesting. Hey, Jin. Good to see you. Mm. Everybody get your group on the way out and do the YouTubey things. Don't forget to like, share, comment whenever you can. And on that, I do believe that I'm going to just sign out for the night and talk to you all soon.